Hello ladies and gents, welcome to another Fishbat Battle Report, 1500 point game Kings of War, Ogres versus Salamanders, and it is a kill scenario, so let's get right into it. If you haven't seen my videos before, this is the notations I use to help you keep up with what's happening in all the action, so pause if you need to. Alright, so getting straight into deployment, we have a 4 foot by 4 foot board. Looking at the Salamanders to start with, on the far left hand side from my perspective, there's his Gekatar Warriors Regiment, which have a lot of attacks, but they're only on a 5 to hit. His Salamander Primes troop, a Tyrant's Regiment, which are rather hard hitting. His very fast moving Kaisenor Lancers. And then further along, his very tough Ankylodon, which has Defense 6, Crushing Strength 4, and quite a few attacks. The Mage Priest behind it with heal. The Ancients troop, the Ceremonial Guard troop, the Battle Captain on Rhinosaur, and then over on the right side, the Ember Sprites Regiment with the Clan Lord behind it. Then on to my Ogres. Shooter Regiment on my right hand side. Then 2 Warrior Regiments with 2-handed weapons, that they get the nice Crushing Strength 2. Behind them the Standard Bearer with the Inspiring. A Warrior's Horde. When you take them in a horde, they're great, they get 18 attacks. 3 to hit, defense 5, very, very solid unit. 2 Berserker Regiments, lots of attacks. The Warlock with the Fireball spell next to the Berserkers to give them Inspiring and to buff up the Warlock's spells because of his Bloodlust rule. Over in the forest, the Boomers, the Giant, and then on the far side is the Red Goblin Blaster. Now, for those who may be a little unfamiliar with the Ogres, the Red Goblin Blaster is a nasty little unit. It is a wagon of explosive barrels, and basically you march it right up to the enemy, and if it is routed off the board, it explodes. Goes bang. Anything in d6 inches takes 2d6 hits at piercing 4. That's a lot of boom. Also, it explodes if it charges an enemy. It can do that in any shooting phase. Well, it charges an enemy in the movement phase, but it can explode in any shooting phase. Point is, you don't want it near your guys. It's dangerous, but it's only 65 points. And we will definitely be seeing more of that this game. And so here's what the deployment looks like. You can see that overall the Salamanders player is really sort of spread out, whereas for my Ogres, they're sort of concentrated slightly right of center of the middle. And pretty dense there, and then on my left flank it's rather a bit more sparse, just the Boomers, the Giant, and the Blaster. And here we see them from another angle. On a tangent, I've only just finished painting this Ogre army, and I'm pretty happy with how they've come out, or Snogres as I like to call them, with all that ice theme. I think they look rather nice, and all of their blues and their whites. Anyway, right into first turn. So, Salamanders are getting ready. Salamanders are making a general advance. Note that the river going across the board there, we have declared that to be decorative terrain because it is just quite little. It's only a bit of a trickle of a creek. It's not really a big river. And so we're saying it's decorative, doesn't impede movement. And to his bottom side of the board, it's a general advance as well. And that was it. Ogre turn 1. The shooters go on top of the hill to get a nice big line of sight to everything they might want to shoot with that good 3-foot range. And on the left-hand side, everything powers on forwards, but along the middle of the board, the Boomers, the Berserkers, the Warriors, they all move very conservatively. They're not using their full movement to go ahead. Only the Warlock comes out the front. And I'm doing this for a good reason. That's because Ogres have movement 6, whereas most of the Lizardmen only have movement 5. What's a Lizardman? These are Salamanders. What am I saying? Anyway, yes, they're movement 6, the Ogres, and if I stay out of his charge range, that will mean that I will get to charge in first and deal the first blow, which I think is going to be quite important, and you'll see that as well. I continue with my bad habit of putting my characters into vulnerable spots, but in this case I genuinely think that it is better for my Warlock to take the charge from those Kaisenor Lancers than my Berserkers or my Boomers. So I've put him out there, and I was hoping he'd take the bait. The other reason why he's advanced so far forwards is so that he can be in range for his Fireball spell, which he casts with 14 dice, and it gets 5 damage, which was nice. Onto the Salamander's second turn. So everything advances once again. You can see there that everything is coming up, and the Kaizenor Lancers are the only ones that have charge range, and so they do actually take the bait, they do charge into that Warlock. And they do 5 damage to it. In the shooting phase, the Mage decides to heal the Kaizenor Lancers. I was about to call them Reavers, but they are Lancers. Heals them for 3 points of damage, so they're only down to 2. And then the Ankylodon remembers that it has a Blow Dart attack, and they shoot the first Berserker Regiment. It looks like a horde, but they're actually 2 different regiments, and does 1 point of damage to them. Everything holds, and everything stands up fine and okay. Onto the Ogre's second turn. This is the big retaliation. So, over by the left-hand side, from out of the range of the photograph, the Red Goblin Blaster has charged into the Lizardmen that were there. By which I do, of course, mean the Salamanders. I'll keep saying it till I get it right. Charges the Gekatar Warrior Regiment, and it explodes. I rolled the d6, and the explosion was big enough that it got the the troop of Salamander Primes as well. Then I rolled 2d6 hits, and it was quite a lot for each. It was like, 9 and 8 or something. And so the Gekatar Warriors took 7 damage, and then the Primes took 8, as well as 1 damage from the shooters, and both of them routed. And so that was a magnificent result. That was probably over 200 points worth of units taken off by a single 65-point sacrificial unit. And that was just marvellous in terms of how this game went. But the rest of the turn went really well as well. The Giant there has retreated back so as to stay out of range of those tyrants. The Warlock and the Berserkers charged in on the Kaizenor Lancers, did 7 damage to it for a total of 9, and routed it. Warriors charge in on the Ancients, do 5 damage, and then one of the two-handed weapon warrior regiments charges in on the, I think they're the Ceremonial Guard? Yes. Do 4 damage, and very surprisingly make a good roll and rout them. And then, over by the right-hand side, we've got the shooters. They shoot the... Now, those things there, they're the fire embers. Ember Sprites. Yeah, Ember Sprites, that's what they're called. Shoot them for 3 damage, and they waver on a good roll. Otherwise, I've got the other regiment of Berserkers down here. They're just waiting to see what happens so they can support where they're needed. The Standard Bearer is coming up, and he is just trying to stay in range of most things to give them inspiring. So this was an overwhelmingly successful turn. Second turn, 4 things have routed already, and most of them were big targets. Gets to Salamander's third turn, and already my opponent is sort of looking around and going, oh, that wasn't good, what am I going to do to respond? Well, he runs in with his Ankylodon, moves his mage up to heal the Ancients. The Tyrants run in to finish off the Warlock, and they certainly do. 6 damage, bang, routed. The Battle Captain charges in to the two-hand Warriors, 3 damage. And those Berserkers charged by the Ankylodon, they're hurt, but they hold. And I think you can already see at this stage that the lack of units he already has means he's not able to engage all of the targets in front of him. I've got already quite a big advantage just by the number of things still standing, which really emphasises, I think, the value of that first charge and the value of that extra movement the Ogre get. So, Ogre's turn 3. A general advance once again. Standard Bearer keeping up with all the action. The Boomers, they decide they're not going to charge the Tyrants, they decide just to shoot them, and so they shoot them for 4 points of damage. And the Giant moves up looking to get some tasty flank action, either on the Tyrants or on the Ankylodon. Berserkers run in to charge the Ankylodon, do some damage, but they fluff, they miss every attack, and so 0 damage is done. The Warriors Horde charge into what was the Ancients, do 6 damage for a total of 11, they pop them, they rout, they're off the board. And so they pivot and they're looking to get some action onto that Ankylodon as well, which is probably going to be sandwiched between the warrior horde and the giant. The two-handed weapon warriors up the top of the photo, 7 damage to that battle captain, which in previous games that battle captain has been a real thorn in my side, but this time he's sort of not done a lot, being behind the lines as he was. Then the shooters do a single point of damage to those Ember Sprites. Salamander's 4th turn. Not a lot left for him to do. Tyrants run into the boomers on the left-hand side there, and it's quite a good move for him because he's far enough forward that my giant, singular, cannot get a charge on them. It's out of his line of sight now. However, he is in line of sight of the Ankylodon. Speaking of which, the Ankylodon charged into those berserkers, 5 damage for a total of 13, and routed them. So they were gone. It's then had a hard choice and decided to face the warriors and the berserkers in such a way that neither of them would get a flank charge. I think they would both have to get a frontal charge from that position. The mage retreats and heals 2 points of damage off of the battle captain, which is wavering. The clan lord charges into my standard bearer and does a single point of damage, and his ember sprites charge into my two-handed warriors and do a single point of damage as well. And a couple of pictures of the action. You can see there. Quite like those tyrants, all the little lizards and snakes and bits and pieces. You can see that it's actually decorated the base of those models with like aquarium plants. What am I saying? Aquarium. Fish tank little things. Like, you know, you go to the pet shop, you get your fish tank accessories. Yeah, those sort of plants. Which I think has been quite a nice effect. Anyway, so getting on to the 4th turn for the Ogres. Now, you can see here, there is not much Salamander stuff left. There's a general advance. The Giant, the Warriors, the Berserkers, they all move in to smack that Ankylodon. And we decide that it's going to be such a massacre, only the Giant attacks, and it does 12 damage and routs it. Because a Giant, charging from the rear with a lot of attacks, it's going to hurt. And it did, even with defense 6. The Boomers, they countercharge the Tyrants, 2 damage, total 6. They stay there, they're happy. The two-handed warriors up the top of the screen, they charge into the battle captain. 7 more damage, and it's enough to rout them. The standard bearer countercharges the clan lord, does a single point of damage. It's not a very effective fight there, but then the other regiment of two-handed weapon warriors charge into the Ember Sprite, 7 damage for a total of 11, and that is enough. They're routed as well. And then the shooters just try to shoot at the clan lord and they miss him. And it's at this point that my opponent concedes. Yes, so a good victory for the Ogres because Salamander opponent conceded. Hooray! But why did I win so well? How did that happen? Well, I've had a bit of a think, and I don't think it was just the dice. So next few slides, I'll go over some of my thoughts about why my Ogres did so well in that game. Let's have a look. So let's go back to turn 1. The Salamanders player has already advanced all of his pieces, and I advance as well. And what I am doing is I'm being very conscious of his charge ranges. As I've already mentioned, I have a superior movement, and I want to be able to pick the charges. What's dangerous for me is in the middle, his Ankylodon has a 12-inch range, the same as me, and so I deliberately keep all of my units out of range of that Ankylodon, because it is brutal. It has got crushing strength 4 and lots of attacks, so I want to stay away from it. And I want to counterattack it on my own terms. Those Kaisenor Lancers, movement 8, it's just quicker than everything I have, and so it is inevitably going to be able to charge me if the Salamander player wants it. And so that being the case, I put my Warlock out the front, first of all so it can use a spell and get some damage in first, but also so that he can be bait. I don't want those Kaisenor Lancers into my Berserkers or into my Boomers, and I prefer that he attacks the Warlock unit. If I was cleverer, I should have angled the Warlock slightly so that they would have exposed the flank to the Berserkers, but alas. In any case, the Warlock was out the front there as bait. In the Salamander's second turn, he responds just as he had to. He could only charge in one unit. And they move in, and they only do 5 damage to the Warlock, which is good. He doesn't rout, he stays there for longer. Now, you can see on the left-hand side that the Gekitar Warriors and the Salamander Primes, the blue and green ones up here, they are near the Red Goblin Blaster, which explodes, and they are very close together. Which is a bad idea, because it means that I'm going to be able to clip both units with the explosion with even moderate luck. And so they shouldn't have been that close together. One of them should have just been the sacrificial unit. Ideally, you wouldn't need a sacrificial unit, because you would have some sort of ranged attack to be able to snipe off the Red Goblin Blaster, but this particular Salamander's army doesn't have much in the way of ranged defense. But anyway, it allowed me to kill 2 birds with 1 stone in a very efficient trade. Now you can see that after the Lizard player has moved forward, Salamanders I should say, I now have my choice of charge targets. Most of the units, I can decide which unit I'm going to send them to, so I've got a lot of choices. The other thing to note here is if you look along the center of the board from the Kaizenal Lancers, down to the Anglodon, the Ancients, the Temple Guard, sort of along that white line. When you look at that, none of the units there are in a position to assist each other if one of them receives a charge. Because if one of them has a unit in base contact, it will be too far back for the other unit to get a flank charge. It will be out of their line of sight. So those units being staggered in that way are not going to help each other. At most, those Ancients might get a frontal charge on something charging the Anklodon. It's just not a very good way, I think, of supporting each other. Like, if he knows that I have a superior movement and that I'm going to charge, then this isn't a very good setup to receive the charge. With the knowledge that I was going to come to him somehow, I think that it could have been prepared better. He could have tried to form up against me or make me charge in a way that I had taken a bad angle and open me up to a flank or something like that. Now, here's the final couple of points I'd like to make. Yeah, I did actually get some decent dice. The Berserkers and the Warrior Horde, they had alright dice. On the left-hand side, the Exploding Goblin Blaster, it had better than average dice. It did a good job with both the damage and the nerve rolls. And with the Warrior Regiment two-handed weapons attacking the Ceremonial Guard troop, it had a very good roll, like very good luck, on the nerve test, which was able to rout them. And so yeah, I did get some good dice, and that does help. But I don't think that's the entirety of the story. If we have a look at his inspiring units, I've put the inspiring units in the middle of these little bubbles, so we can see what is being inspired here. If you can see my Warlock there near the middle of the board, it is only inspiring to Berserkers, but it's next to a Berserker regiment, and it's helping to inspire them. Then my Standard Bearer over near the right-hand side, it is inspiring a regiment of warriors, it is inspiring the Warrior Horde, and it's in a position that it can move and next turn help the Warrior Regiment that's further up the board as well. So he's in a good spot. But then if you look at my opponent's side of the board, he only has a single unit with inspiring. And that guy is way off in the corner. And the only unit that is inspiring is the Ember Sprites, and they are the cheapest unit he's brought. And they can be nice. They've got a decent breath attack, but they're a throwaway unit. They are not his priority stuff. They're not the stuff he wants to keep alive. He needs to keep alive his Anklodon, his Tyrants. If it had been on the other side of the board, it could have made reroll tests for the Gekitar and the Salamander Primes. If it had been further towards the middle, it could have been a reroll for that lucky nerve test on the Ceremonial Guard troop. The moral of the story here really is that inspiring is an important rule for preventing those lucky nerve tests. And the wise placement of inspiring units, it's no guarantee of success, nothing's a guarantee of success, but that it is a good insurance policy against lucky nerve rolls. And so that would have helped as well. But all in all, I can't be too harsh on my opponent. Like, he's relatively new to the game, whereas I've had the fortune of playing a dozen games or so of this, and he took what was admittedly quite a bad game for him in a very gentlemanly fashion. So I thank him very much for a very fun game. And yeah, hopefully this is something everyone can learn from on the internet. Do you agree with my tactics? Do you disagree? What do you think of my analysis? Let me know in the comments. Anyway, thank you all very much for watching the video, and have a nice day. Bye!